Mr. President, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to have this interview at these days when we remember that 5 years ago the Russian assistance came to Syria. So after 5 years of the Russian military operation nowadays, can you say that the war in Syria now is over?
No, definitely not. As long as you have terrorists occupying some areas of our country and committing different kind of crimes and assassinations and other crimes, different kind of crimes, it's not over. And I think their supervisors are keen to make it still going on for a long time. That's what we believe in.
And what moments of heroism of the Russians do you recall and keep in your heart? Which of them do you consider worth of telling to your grandchildren, let's say?
I think so many. And I remember some of them, of course, but after 5 years of this cooperation between the Syrian and the Russian army in a vicious war, I think heroism is becoming a collective act. It's not only individual, it's not only few cases of heroism that you remember. Remember, for example, if you talk about the military aircraft pilots, the air forces, the Russian pilots keep flying over the terrorists on daily basis, risking their lives. And you had few aircraft that been shot by the terrorists. If we talk about the other officers, they are supporting the Syrian army, not in the rear lines, on the front lines. And you had martyrs. So I think what I'm going to tell my grandchildren someday, not only about this heroism, I'm going to talk about these common values that we have in both our armies that made us brothers during this war, these noble values, faithful to their causes, defending the civilians, defending the innocents. Many things to talk about this war.
And what moment does symbolize for you a turning point during this conflict, during this war?
Yeah, it's been now 10 years, nearly 10 years since the war started. So you have many turning points that I can mention, not only one, in different ways, let's say. The first one in 2013, when we started liberating many areas, especially the middle of Syria from al-Nusra. Then in 2014, it was in the other direction, when ISIS appeared suddenly with American support, and they occupied a very important part of Syria and Iraq at the same time. And this is where the terrorists started occupying other areas, because ISIS was able to distract the Syrian army from fulfilling its mission in liberating the western part of Syria. Then the other turning point was when the Russians came to Syria in 2015, and we started together liberating many areas. In that stage, let's say, after the Russian came to Syria to support the Syrian army, I would say the turning point was to liberate the eastern part of Aleppo. This is where the liberating of other areas in Syria started from that point. It was important because of the importance of Aleppo, and because it was the beginning of the liberation, the large-scale liberation that continued later to Damascus, to the rest of Aleppo recently at the beginning of this year, the last battle, and other areas in the eastern part of Syria and the southern part. So these are the main turning points. If you put them together, all of them are strategic, and all of them change the course of this war.
I now will turn to some actual news, and we in Russia follow what now is happening in the region of Armenian and Azerbaijani conflict.
Yeah.
And definitely Turkey plays a role there. Is it negative or positive? That is not for me to judge, but I would like to ask you about Turkey's and Erdogan's policies. So in recent years, Turkey has been trying to maximize its international influence. We all see its presence in Libya, its intervention to Syria, territorial disputes with Greece, and now open support to Azerbaijan. What do you think about that kind of behavior of Ankara and Erdogan's personally? And should the international community pay more attention to this sort of neo-Osmanism?
Let's be blunt and clear. Erdogan has supported terrorists in Syria, and he's been supporting terrorists in Libya. And he was the main instigator and initiator of the recent conflict that happened that's been going on in Nagorno-Karabakh between Azerbaijan and Armenia. So I would sum his behavior as dangerous for different reasons. First of all, because it reflects the Muslim Brotherhood behavior. Muslim Brotherhood is a terrorist extremist group. Second, because he's creating war in different areas just to distract his own public opinion in Turkey from focusing on his behavior within Turkey, inside Turkey, especially after his scandalous relation with ISIS in Syria. And everybody knows that the ISIS used to sell Syrian oil through Turkey with the umbrella of the American Air Forces and, of course, the support of the Turks and the involvement of the Turks, not the support, the involvement in selling this oil. So this is his goal, and this is dangerous. So whether the international community should be aware or not, the word international community in reality is only a few countries, the great powers and rich countries, and let's call them the influencers on the political arena. The majority of this international community is complicit with Turkey in supporting the terrorists. So they know what Turkey is doing. They are happy about what Turkey is doing. And Turkey is armed for those countries in fulfilling their policies and dreams in this region. So no, we cannot bet on the international community at all. You can bet on the international law, but it doesn't exist. There's no institution to implement the international law. So we have to depend on ourselves in Syria and on the support of our friends.
More about this conflict. So there were reports that some terrorists from the groups that were fighting previously in Syria are now being transferred to this conflict zone between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Yeah. Can you confirm that? Do you have any information about fighters going from Syria to?
We definitely can confirm it, not because we have evidences, but sometimes if you don't have evidence, you have indications. Turkey used those terrorists coming from different countries in Syria. They used the same method in Libya. They used Syrian terrorists in Libya, maybe with other nationalities. So it's self-evident and very much probable that they are using that in Nagorno-Karabakh. Because, as I said earlier, they are the one who started this problem, this conflict. They encouraged this conflict. So they wanted to achieve something, and they're going to use the same method. So we can say for sure that they've been using Syrian and other nationalities of terrorists in Nagorno-Karabakh.
In Nagorno-Karabakh. Let's turn now to the relations between our countries, Russia and Syria. Are there any plans for your contacts or meetings with President Putin?
We had regular contacts, mainly on the phone. Whenever something new happened, and whenever there's a need for this conversation. Of course, we're going to talk in the future. We're going to meet in the future, but that depends on the current on the political situations regarding Syria. And as you know now, because of the coronavirus, the whole world was paralyzed. So in the near future, I think the conversation will be on the phone.
And will you raise a question of the new credits for Syria, for new loans?
Yeah, in our economic situation, it's very important to seek loans, but at the same time, you shouldn't start this or take this step without being able to pay back the loan. Otherwise, it's going to be burden, and it's going to be a debt. So it has two aspects. So talking about loans is in our minds, and discuss it with the with our Russian counterparts. But we have to prepare for such a step before taking it seriously, or practically, let's say.
I see. Recently, the delegation from Russia came, and Vice Prime Minister Borisov was here. Is now Syria interested in buying anti-aircraft systems like S-400, or demanding for additional S-300?
Yeah. Actually, we started a plan of upgrading our army 2 years ago. And it's self-evident that we're going to do this upgrade in cooperation with the Russian Ministry of Defense, because for decades now, our army depends fully on the Russians' armaments. But you have priorities. It's not necessarily the missiles. Mm-hmm. Maybe you have other priorities now regarding the conflict on the ground. So there's a full-scale plan, mm-hmm. but we have to move according to these priorities. Usually we don't talk about the details mm-hmm. of our military plans, but in general, as I said, it's upgrading the army in every aspect of the military field.
You definitely follow the presidential campaign in the United States.
Yeah.
And do you hope that the new US president, regardless of the name of the winner, will review sanctions policies towards Syria?
We don't usually expect presidents in the American elections. We only expect CEO, because you have board. This board made of the lobbies mm-hmm. and the big corporates like banks and armaments and oil and etc. So what you have is CEO, and this is a CEO doesn't have the right or the authority to review. He has to implement. And that's what happened to Trump when he became president after the elections.
He used to be CEO for many years before.
Exactly, and he is CEO anyway. But he wanted to follow, to pursue his own policy, and he was about to pay the price. You know, you remember the impeachment issue. Yeah. And he had to swallow every word he said before the elections. So that's why I said you don't expect president, you only expect CEO. And if you want to talk about changing the policy, you have one board. The same board will not change its policy, because the CEO will change, but the board is still the same. So don't expect anything.
Who are this board?
Sorry?
Who are these people?
As I said, this board is made of the lobbies. The lobbyists. So they implement whatever they want, and that they control the Congress and the other, and the media, etc. So there's a alliance between those different self-vested interest corporates in the US.
Mm-hmm. So Trump pledged to withdraw American troops from Syria, but he failed to do that. Now he is being nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Do you think if he manages to bring his troops, American troops, home, is he good to be awarded with a Nobel Peace Prize?
He's nominated?
He's nominated.
Oh, I don't know about this. First, if you want to talk about the nomination for peace, peace is not only about withdrawing your troops. It's a step, it's a good step, and it's a necessary step. But peace is about your policy, it's about your behavior. It means to stop occupying land, to stop toppling governments just because they are not with you, to stop creating chaos in different areas of the world. Peace is to follow the international law and to support the United Nations Charter, etc. This is peace. This is where you deserve Nobel Peace Prize. Obama had this prize. He had just been elected. He hadn't done anything. The only achievement he had that time, maybe he moved from his house to the White House and he had Nobel Prize. Yeah. So they would give it to Trump for something maybe similar. I don't know what is it, but definitely not the peace.
Trump acknowledged recently that he intended to eliminate you personally, and that the Pentagon chief Mattis persuaded him not to do so. Did you know about that at that time, and were some measures undertaken to prevent it?
Assassination is American modus operandi. That's what they do all the time, for decades, everywhere, in different areas in this world. So it's not something new. So you have to keep it in your mind that this kind of plan is always existed for different reasons. And we have to expect this kind of plans in our situation in Syria, with this conflict, with the Americans. They occupy our land, and they are supporting the terrorists. So it's expected. Even if you don't have any information, it should be self-evident. How to prevent, it's not about the incident per se, it's not about this plan regarding this person or this president. It's about the behavior. Nothing would deter the United States from committing such kind of vicious actions or acts unless there's international balance, where the United States cannot get away with its crime. Otherwise, it's going to continue this kind of acts in different areas, and nothing would stop it.
And were any other attempts on you during your presidency?
I didn't hear of any attempt. But as I said, it's self-evident that you have many attempts, or maybe let's say plans. Mm-hmm. If I have to be more precise, mm-hmm. Plans. Were they active or on hold? Nobody knows.
Now turning back to situation in Syria, and will you run for presidency in the year 2021?
It's still early to talk about it, but we still have, because we still have a few months. I can take this decision at the beginning of next year.
Interesting. And have you congratulated Mr. Alexander Lukashenko with his inauguration in Belarus? And do you probably see similarities between political technologies that were used by the UK and the US to support Belarusian opposition, and those methods that were used against Syria and against the Syrian state in information war?
I did send a congratulation letter to President Lukashenko, and that's normal. But regarding what's happening in Belarus, regardless of the similarities between the two countries, between Syria and Belarus, or the differences, regardless of whether you have real conflict or artificial one in a country, the West, as long as it hasn't changed its hegemonic policy around the world, is going to interfere anywhere in the world. If you have real problem in your country, whether it's a small or big, is going to interfere. And if it's domestic, they're going to make it international just to interfere and meddle in your affairs. If you don't have problem, they're going to do their best to create problems and then to make it international again and meddle in your affairs. This is their policy. So it's not about what's happening in Belarus. Like any other country, Syria, Belarus, your country, every country, they have their own problems. Do the West have the right to interfere or not? That's what we have to oppose. So in the, going back to your question, yes, it's the same behavior, it's the same strategy, it's the same tactics. The only difference is the branding of the products, different headlines. Mm-hmm. They use certain headlines for Russia, another for Venezuela, another one for Syria, and so on. So yes, it's not about Belarus, it's about the behavior of the West, and it's about their strategy for the future, because they think with the rising of Russia, with the rising of China, with the rising of other powers around the world, this is existential threat for them. So the only way to oppose or to face this threat is by creating chaos around the world.
So you have already mentioned the coronavirus, and it affected all the humankind. And were someone from the government infected, or maybe you personally?
Thank God, no. And I don't think anyone of our government has been infected.
Yeah, that's good news. And would you personally like to take the Russian vaccine?
Of course, in these circumstances, anyone would love to be vaccinated against this dangerous virus. But I think it's not available for the international market yet, but we're going to discuss it with the Russian authority when it's available internationally to have vaccines for the Syrian market. It's very important.
Yes, and Russians have already suggested that it can be available for our international partners. So
they said in November it could be available. Yeah.
So you will be asking for the Russian vaccine?
Definitely, it's necessity these times.
And in what amount?
That depends on how much available, and we have to discuss the amount that we need with the health authority in Syria.
So you are going to have negotiations,
of course, definitely,
in details with the Russian authorities.
Of course, everybody in Syria is asking about the Russian vaccines when it's going to be available. Many Syrians.